We are about to start a project that we have been wanting to do for years. You might have seen us build out our Transit Connect and travel all over the country in it. So we are super excited to build a teardrop camper from scratch. The kicker here is that it's actually not for us. Our friends Ivy and Luke love to travel just as much as we do, and I guess they're not about that hashtag van life, so let's build them the coolest camper you've ever seen. Also, they just had a little baby girl, so we have to fit 2 beds.
Well guys, it is February and iFixit is sponsoring another series on the channel. Last year we actually did the Ford F-150 restoration. This year we are doing the camper, obviously, but February means it is Fix-It Feb, which, if you don't know already, is something that Molly and I are very passionate about. Our right to repair is constantly under attack, and we love partnering with iFixit whenever possible to help spread the word and message that your right to repair is very important. So get buckled up, because over the next 4 weeks, we're gonna be building out this camper, and every single week, we're gonna be giving away a set of goodies from iFixit to one of you guys. So all you have to do is comment down below. You can also check out the links in the description below to check out some of iFixit's products, but we're gonna be selecting a random commenter out of a video we post every single week and giving something away. So get commenting, get subscribing, and enjoy this series because we're very excited about it. Thank you so much for fighting for our right to repair iFixit, and thank you for supporting our channel. And without further ado, let's get back into this video. For our camper build, we chose to go with the very popular 4x8 trailer from Harbor Freight. This is a very small utility trailer. It's very light duty, but it's also very inexpensive and easy to get a hold of. We chose to use this one because it was one of the easiest to actually get, and it's also very stripped down, so we're not paying extra for decking or anything like that. We really just wanted the steel frame mostly, and with steel prices the way they are, this was actually much cheaper to buy this than to build our own. However, we will be severely modifying this as our camper is a 5x8, not a 4x8, so we will have sort of a deck over design, as well as we will be stiffening up the frame and adding in a bigger axle with larger tires. But this is going to be a great starting platform for our camper build. Now, like every other one of our projects, we start off in SketchUp creating a full-scale model, and I actually started off by creating the trailer, which is not shown here, which that alone took a very long time, but this 4 minutes of footage you are about to watch took me 12 hours of modeling. And the best part is, this is version 9 of the camper. So I have approximately close to somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 hours modeling this camper, which is quite a lot of time. However, this is probably one of my favorite parts of building, which I know, that probably sounds ridiculous, but I absolutely love designing products like this because there are so many factors that go into it. And with this one especially, there was a lot of things to consider and a lot of ways that we are trying to reduce the overall cost and make it overall more efficient. There are just so many design aspects of this camper, and ultimately I think we ended up with something that is really quite good. The main design criteria that I was working around was cost, budgetary concerns, so we are trying to keep this camper under $5,000 in materials, which we'll find out if that ends up happening. But the other thing was weight. We're trying to keep this thing as light as possible for both the trailer's sake, but also for this overall camper's design. We wanted it to be as light as possible so that pretty much any vehicle can tow it, and it will have the least impact on fuel economy as possible, as this is hopefully going to end up going all around the country. Obviously, functionality was also a big design aspect of this camper, so things like how much sleep area do we have? Can you sit up in the camper? Was the kitchen going to be large? Was it going to be small? Was it going to have a sink? Was it not going to have a sink? Were we going to have it in the front or the back? Were we going to have pull-outs? All these various aspects we went through in detail. In fact, all of the 9 iterations were completely different of this camper, and we ultimately landed on this one, which is very minimalist and simplified. And the reason for that was we ultimately decided we don't actually know exactly the way they're going to use this, and so it was best to build something that was more of a shell that had more modular pieces to it that would allow us to make modifications and add things to it as needed in the future and create something that, would be able to grow and expand with them as they figure out exactly the way they want to use this. So ultimately we went with a pretty minimalist design, didn't add any bells and whistles to this, but I think it's going to be a pretty great shell. One of the big things that we did was create very large oversized doors, much bigger than a normal camper of this size would have, which simply means it's going to make it a lot easier to get in and out of, as well as to put things in the camper to actually take with you, as well as a very simplified electrical system that has channels that are actually pre-routed into the interior core of the plywood shell of this camper. And also, on top of all of that, we are having to think about insulation and channel routing for various accessories and things and, future-proofing this design. So there was a ton of design elements and aspects of this, and it took a lot of time to get to where it is today. But you know what? I think we did end up landing on something that's going to be pretty functional for them. And hopefully they'll get a lot of use for it in the future, and we'll be able to expand upon this later on. With the SketchUp model done, it's time to create the toolpath files, which is what the CNC machine will actually use to cut all of these parts out. And for that, we are using Aspire, which is also known as VCarve. We use the Sheets tab to organize all 21 of our sheets over 3 material thicknesses, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and 3/4 of an inch. We also took time to label these as well as set up their actual cut dimensions, because we will be breaking down every one of these sheets so that they can fit on our 5x5 CNC machine, but not every single sheet will be cut directly in half. So within the Sheets tab, we have the thickness. We also have the sheet number, which is 1.1, 1.2, and then we have the size of that sheet, just to keep things really well organized as we're generating our toolpaths. Because we are building a 5-foot wide camper, the majority of the parts are 5 feet long, which means an 8-foot sheet of plywood gets a lot of waste, because the second half of that piece of plywood that's 3 feet long, well, there's only so many small parts that can fit in those, and after a handful of sheets, you run out of uses for those small pieces, and eventually you just end up wasting a ton of material. So I went through every single part that I could possibly think of cutting in half or into smaller pieces, and I broke them down as small as possible and used dovetail joints to put everything back together just anywhere I could, just to save on material and make this way more efficient. It also helps because we have that 5x5 CNC machine. It allows us to be able to nest these parts into smaller sheet goods and optimize them as best as possible. Ultimately, this ended up saving over 10 sheets of plywood, which is not trivial because this plywood is not cheap. So doing this, although it took a lot of time, ended up saving us a lot of money, and it also reduced the amount of waste that we have in this project. Now, with a project this big and this complex with this many parts and sheets, it's very important to use layers on all of your parts so that you don't have to generate toolpaths on every single sheet and for every single part. So as I was optimizing the parts, I was also putting them onto layers which corresponded to their material thickness and whether they were an outer profile, inner profile, or a pocket. So each one of these parts was getting added to a separate layer, which is why they are different colors, and that will be very useful in a moment when we go to generate all of the toolpaths. I then created a toolpath for each one of the layers, and at the very bottom you can click the selector button and change it from manual to automatic, and you can associate that toolpath with any part that is on that layer, which simply means it applies the toolpath to all parts that are on the layer. However, when it does that, it only applies them onto the current sheet that you're on. So once you have all of the toolpaths created for all of the layers, you can save them as a toolpath template. And then you can load that template back into Aspire, and you can apply it across every single one of the sheets, which also means you can update those toolpaths across all the sheets if you need to as well, which just simply means that I created a toolpath template that applied all the toolpaths to 21 sheets with 3 separate toolpaths per thickness. It's a lot. But with the toolpaths generated, now all I had to do was save them to individual files, and I just made sure to keep them very well organized by using the same exact labeling that we used on the sheet name, and I saved those to folders based on their material thickness. Now, if you're interested in either one of the VCAR files or the SketchUp files, they'll both be available on our website for sale, and there'll be a link in the description below if you're interested.
She's squatting.
She's squatting a little. No, she's leveled out. Look. Now I'm not looking down, you know. She's got quite the rear end. Now I'm looking more straight.
She's got quite the rear end.
She got quite the rear end on her. Today is going to be an interesting day. It's going to be a long day. It's a day that we start breaking down all of these sheet goods, getting them on the CNC, and basically the goal for today is to keep the CNC running all day long with as little downtime as possible. So yeah, we're going to be starting off by cutting these panels into smaller sections. We know what size they need to be based on our toolpath file. We actually labeled them so that we know what size the material is and then what length dimension to cut our sheet goods down to. So we're going to get them loaded up on the CNC, and while the first one's cutting, we'll start cutting the second one over here. And yeah, it's going to be a giant assembly line. Got the CNC all greased up, a little overkill greased up, I realize at this point. But got it tuned up for the day because she's going to be putting in the work for sure.
A long day for her.
Yeah, I think the toolpath calculations estimate like 6+ hours of cutting of cut time for these sheets. So let's get to it. Moment of truth, we're going to see if the first few cuts are actually working as they're supposed to. I'm going to put one whole half together. Let's see if these joints work, because that's the biggest question here. Oh, thank you. Are you going to help us put the... Oh, Scruffy. Alright, let's see here. It should be a very tight fit. Basically a snap together fit. Look at that. I think that'll do it.
Hope we don't have to get it back off.
No, we don't. Let's see. It's strong.
Wow.
Look at there.
into the shop from a really productive day yesterday. Our friend Luke came and started sanding all the pieces as they were coming off of the CNC, and poor thing, there was a lot of pieces to sand. While he was doing that, Dylan was using the flush trim router bit to get all the tabs and fuzzies off of all the pieces, while I was managing the CNC getting pieces off as they were getting done. So we just had a really big assembly line going, which made to a really productive day. Don't forget to leave a comment down below because we will be picking a winner from this video to give away an iFixit goodie bag. I'm actually filming this the day that we're posting, so I'm gonna get off here so we can get back to work. So we will see you guys in the next one. We hope you enjoyed this video.